to another bike video. This is my new second-hand bike. I found this one on Facebook Marketplace for £250. Full Ultegra, Trek 5000, I think it's around 2005 this model. Full carbon, weighs 8.9 kilos. I'm going to see what I want to do with this bike. But there's a few things I've done already. The first one is the tyres. This actually came with solid tyres. These are rock solid, there's nothing to them. They're only 23mm and I don't want them. So I changed the tyres. I had some old GP5000s lying around. So I popped them straight on, just some normal butyl in the tubes. And the second thing I did was change the saddle. I also had this saddle lying around from a previous bike that someone bought that hasn't been used. So I chucked that saddle on. I had a big bulbous thing on the back. So that was one of the first upgrades that I made. I haven't done the bar tape yet because the handlebars are the wrong way round. So, well, the wrong way around for the UK. So the right lever does the rear brake and the left lever does the front brake, and I want that swapped. So I haven't updated the bar tape yet, but it's all to come. Another thing that I've done is I've given the bike a full clean. So I've done everything. I had to give the cassette and the chain a really good clean. There was lots of gunk lying around in the areas here, but there's, of course, you can see there's a few scuff marks on it, but it's done a lot of miles, this bike. It's been to Belgium and back. It's done a lot of miles that the lady I bought it from. The second thing I want to do is I want to open up the free hub and the rear cassette here because it doesn't spin as freely as I'd want it to, and we'll go from there. So today I've been to the shops. I've grabbed myself a mini pump and I've got some levers and another inner tube just for in there because I'm going to be using this for work, so you don't want to be stuck halfway with a puncture. And then finally I've ordered some new brake pads. These ones seem a bit rubbish. We'll see how they go, and if the brake pads don't work I'll be investing in some new levers. Next on my to-do list is literally to straighten these bars out. They're a bit zigzaggy. It goes up, down, up again, and I like it to be flat, and it gives you a bit more space along the bar here as well. So that's my next job. Bars are done. So I flipped the stem, I angled up the bars a little bit so the tops are flat, and then I had to move these down and of course installed some new bar tape so it looks fresh. Taking the wheels apart was actually quite easy. It was quite literally just a job of basically taking the old grease out, the dirty stuff, putting some new grease in, and they ran pretty smooth again. Then it was a case of stripping the paint down, which was a long and arduous job. So I started sanding with a 320 grit, and I was doing a lot of the awkward areas first, and I decided when I got to primer I would stop. Obviously see here I punched through a little bit more than I thought I would. But basically I'm actually gonna do less with the 320 now. I'm just gonna do the main areas, try and punch off loads of the top layer, and as soon as I see a little bit of grey I'll go down because I was getting through way too much, way too quick, and I had to be a little bit careful. So here's my paint. Initially we've got a carbon primer just to go over everything. Then the logos are going to be in this like plum purple, deep plum purple. Next up, we're going to have the silver over the top of it, pewter silver. Should look quite cool, this thing. And then finally, we've got two layers. So the first layer of primer is going to be this Kieran flake. So it looks a little bit more shiny, makes it look a little bit, stand out a bit more. And then finally, we've got this Frame Builders transparent clear coat to finish off with. I have made some progress as much as possible with all the components on. It's just small bits to go, such as here, and just tucked in behind the chain rings there. But everything else is done. It's either down to primer or carbon. I tried to keep as much primer as possible because it should just spray over and attach to and stick to the primer just fine. And I didn't want to go through much carbon. Some areas I've done a bit more, but as a whole, I'm nearly there. It's taken me about 4 days to get to this point, so don't expect a fast job. It takes forever and ever. With that done, I could then finally strip the bike, and then it was a case of just finishing off all the unsanded areas where there was still some blue paint left. One of my goals whilst doing this bike was to keep the serial code of the bike on the bottom, so I got some masking tape and simply cut around it, and it turned out quite good in the end. Alright, sweet. Next up here we need to wash all of this off. I'm going to have gloves on so I don't get any of my hand grease on there, and then after drying it I'm going to cover up all the holes that I need to cover up, and then it's going to be time to get the primer on. So I ended up washing the bike quite a lot during this process. Anytime there was some leftover sandpaper on there, or if I'd sandpapered any clear coat during the painting process, I washed it again, or if I touched it with my hands just to make sure there's no grease underneath the paint. So when the masking tape was on, I then cut around the edges of the masking tape to then give it a clean, flush area around any holes, so there was as much paint as possible but not going into the holes. The first step was a nice even layer of primer, and I ended up doing 1 or 2 layers, and then once I'd done that I just gave it a very light sand down, just because then it had more surface to grip on, and after the sand down gave it another wash too. Here we go, time to start off the spray job, and to begin with I'm going to mark all the areas that I want to spray in purple, and then after 24 hours I'll put the decals over the top and spray the rest of the bike silver. So here we go. The stuff on Spray.bike is actually quite dry, so this is my base layer, so I don't mind it spreading onto other areas, but if you're worried about it spreading onto areas that you've already sprayed, I'd recommend covering them up. Okay, so I gave that 20 minutes before I did the second layer, and now I'm going to give it another 15 minutes, because on Spray.bike's website they recommend smoothing it down, hardening the area with some grease-proof paper or some baking paper if you're here in the UK, and I'm going to smooth it down with that, and hopefully it should look good afterwards. Leave it 24 hours and then I'll put the next layer on. There are some downsides to doing this outside. If you're an insect right now and you're living around here, they're like, ooh, what is this? How about I touch it? So downside to doing that outside, but because I've put the extra layer on, they should be enough to just smooth out with a bit of sandpaper, I hope, and we'll see how it goes. I then spent the next 10 minutes karate chopping all the bugs away, and then got to work with hardening the paint by using the grease-proof paper, and I just used a circular motion, lots of pressure, and that seemed to work just fine. It was all going really smoothly up until this day, and on the day that I was doing this, the layer of purple, I was in a road race, and during the road race I was involved in a crash, and unfortunately it required some surgical intervention. So it all had to be put on delay, all had to be put on hold, and I'll get back to you when I could actually do something about it. Stick around for part 2.